This is Retirement Keys with Anthony Congemi from Crescent City Retirement Group. When a part of your financial strategy is out of tune, your long-term goals, your retirement savings, and your legacy can all suffer. With many years of experience in the financial industry, Anthony provides his clients and prospects with the information they need regarding Social Security, retirement income planning, wealth management, and much more. Listen in as we address your financial concerns and provide helpful solutions to put you on the path to achieving your retirement goals. And now, here is Retirement Keys with your host, Anthony Congemi. And welcome to Retirement Keys with Anthony Congemi, our host, and myself, your co-host, Tony Shore. Anthony, great show today. I can't wait to dig into our topic. First, though, Anthony, with Crescent City Retirement, I might add, let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you if they have questions about what we're talking about on the show or just want to set up that no charge, no obligation consultation.
Absolutely, Tony. So we have a great website, crescentcityretirement.com. Actually, a lot of our shows are archived on the website and a great place for us to communicate. Of course, the questions that we're going to be talking about, the questions to ask before you retire, that PDF with those questions are on the website. So please just go to our website at crescentcityretirement.com. That's a great place to get the questions we feel are so strong that you should know to ask your retirement planner before you retire, or even in retirement. If you have a retirement plan and you would like some of what we think are some of the best questions that you could be asking on our website. So just go to the website, get the questions, and of course, that's a great place to schedule an appointment to look at a retirement plan that we would offer you and put together for you. As it is, it's complimentary for our radio audience. So go to our website at crescentcityretirement.com or call us at 504-828-2171, and we'll make sure that we get some time together so we can talk about your own retirement.
Yeah, and that's key. And I love the fact that you put together this list of questions people need to be asking before they get into retirement. So if we have listeners out there who haven't yet retired, no matter where you're at, whether you're 30, 40, 50, in your 60s, or maybe you've just retired, these are still great questions that you need to have down, you need to understand. And we've covered a lot of the list. There are 20 questions here. And we're actually on question 13, Anthony. So what is that next question? What is question 13?
So question 13 on the list is, why does the sequence of returns matter in retirement? And so this is really a good question to ask, but the first part of this is to really understand what that means. And it just simply means sequence of returns, meaning what is the order of the returns. So as an example, when we talk about averages, or we would call the flaw, not the law, but the flaw of averages, it's real important, and that really, kind of highlights the sequence of returns. And I'll give you just a quick example, Tony. If I have $300,000 in an investment account, a portfolio, let's say in my IRA, and over a 5-year period, I'm averaging, that's the key word, averaging 6%, okay? When you look at the sequence of returns, if I was pulling out $18,000 a year off that $300,000, that's a 6% withdrawal on $300,000. 6% of 300 is 18, right? So I'm pulling out $18,000 a year or $1,500 a month, and I know my portfolio is averaging 6%. Again, the key word here is average.
Right.
If in the sequence of returns, Tony, if I had a -10 and a -10 in the first 2 years, and then a positive 10, a positive 15, and a positive 25 in the remainder 3 years of the 5 years, that's a positive 10, positive 15, positive 25. That's a 50% positive return. And we had a negative 10 and a negative 10 in the first 2 years. So that's a negative 20. That's positive 50, negative 20. That's a positive 30% return over a 5-year period. That's an average of 6%. Okay. So what, and I, don't get lost in the math, but at the end of the day, if I have an average of 6%, which in that case is an average of 6, and all I pulled out was 18,000 a year. If you look at a financial calculator, Tony, and you do that math, that negative 10, then plus 10, plus 15, and plus 25, that's an average 6% return over 5 years. And if all you withdrew was the 18,000 a year, you'll find that just in the end of the 5th year, the portfolio is down almost $40,000. And you may say, well, why is that? I mean, I averaged 6%. Why would my portfolio be down and all I pulled out was 18,000 a year? And the answer is because of the sequence of returns. Okay. If I would have had a linear return of 6%, like let's say I could buy a CD at 6% and I just pulled off the interest of, let's say, 1,500 a month or 18,000 a year, again, 6% of 300, I would have never touched my principal. Okay. But because of the order of the return, so if I have money in the market, I can't, and the money's, market's up and down. I just have to be careful that I'm not taking money out of the wrong account at the wrong time. So the sequence of the returns is very important. And we get caught up in these averages, which averages are good. But if we're pulling money out of the wrong account at the wrong time, Tony, it can really be a detrimental to our overall retirement plan.
Sure. I mean, if you're pulling money out of a retirement account and it's all, attached, it's in the market, and you're pulling out when the market is down, you're really you're doubling down on your losses is really what you're doing. You're magnifying your losses even more, and that can really make a difference in retirement. I mean, that can mean the difference of running out of money in retirement or not running out of the money in retirement, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. And so when we talk about the sequence of returns, we also talk about kind of retirement planning or distribution planning 101, which, really is a foundational thing, is the, different phases in retirement. So we have this accumulation phase where we're putting money in, we're working and we're saving, right? So while we're working and putting into our retirement accounts, 401ks or whatever type of retirement accounts we have, we're working and we're saving. So we're in that accumulation phase. But then when we get close to retirement, in other words, we're getting close now to when we're going to start needing that money, then we move into what's called the preservation phase. And that's the phase where we're trying to more or less protect what we have. And then you move into what's called the distribution phase. So now, again, you're not putting money in anymore. You're doing what? You're taking money out.
You're withdrawing. Yeah.
You're withdrawing. So right off the bat, it's very easy to see that our accumulation phase, if the market is up, we're putting money in. If the market is down, we're putting money in. We call that dollar cost averaging, right? It's a good thing to be putting money into your portfolio, even obviously when the market is down. You're buying those shares at a better price. So, but you're in this accumulation phase. But just as, let's say, good as it is to put money into a portfolio when the market is down, that's how bad it is to be taking money out, right, when the market is down. And so it's real important to understand why the sequence of returns is so important. And equally so, it's important to understand where the distributions are going to be coming from. We want to make sure we're not pulling money out of the wrong accounts, Tony, at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's really important. So sequence of returns matters, and then that leads into number 14. Another question, if the stock market drops significantly, how is that going to affect my plan, like 2022? And you somewhat address that with the sequence of returns, right?
Yeah, it is, Tony. And it's also the idea that there's really three, and I'm going to use buckets here as an analogy.
Okay.
There's really three buckets of money we should have carved out when we think about our retirement plan. One bucket is going to be the liquidity or the emergency money. And that money, whether it's retirement money, it can be IRA, it can be pre-tax money, it can be after-tax money. So, but that liquid bucket, that's not for income and that's not for growth. That's liquidity, right? That's the emergency money that we need, or we need to buy a new car or, bigger expenses. Some people even use that money for vacations, but it's liquid money. And now, Tony, with interest rates as they are, we can even in these liquid, emergency buckets or, these slush fund, you call it, any of that, we can ladder very short-term CDs. I mean, we're buying 6-month, 9-month, 12-month, even 3-month CDs and laddering CDs like in the old days, like in the 80s, where people would build these CD ladders. So even though you have your liquid money, emergency money, slush fund money, it can be very liquid, it can be very accessible. But it can still earn money now because we have, some better rates, much better rates than what we had in the past, like I say, for very short-term CDs. So that's kind of your liquid bucket. Then you have the income plan or the income bucket. And that's, Tony, that's your Social Security strategy. That's your defined benefit plan, your pension. That's your annuities. Maybe that's a bond ladder. But this is all structured income. So in your income plan, this is the money every month that you know you're going to need to live on to maintain your lifestyle. So in that income planning bucket, that's the structure, right? That's the structured income that has to meet your monthly obligations. We have to factor in, obviously, taxes, federal and state taxes. We have to factor in Medicare costs. So we're going for a net number, right? And somebody might say, oh, well, when I retire, I need, and I'll just pick a number, Tony, $5,000 a month net, after taxes. Or somebody else might say 7,000, or somebody might say 3,500. Whatever that number is, that income number, we just have to make sure that in the income bucket, we have structured income to meet that obligation every month. That is not subject to the whims of the market or anything else. Structure. So at the end of it, Tony, the question says, if the stock market drops significantly, how will that affect my plan? The answer is it shouldn't affect your plan if you have things broken out properly.
Yeah. If you have a plan in place and if you're working with a financial advisor who's looking out for your best interests and helps you get a plan in place and you stick to that plan. That's the key, isn't it?
It really is. And I mean, it's just like, it's as far as I'm concerned, the liquidity bucket and the income bucket and the growth bucket are really apples and oranges and pears. They're just different, and the investments inside of the liquidity bucket, the income bucket, and the growth bucket also are different. Right. And that's why there's different investments and different tools. You wouldn't use a screwdriver if you needed a hammer, right? I mean, right. So we just have to use the right tools or the job. That's all.
Exactly. Well, before we move on to the next question, which ties in here about liquidity and where that money should be, I think we should take a quick break and give our listeners a chance to set up that complimentary consultation with you.
Yeah, so I hope you do. If you'd like a second opinion on your retirement plan, we 100% would love to offer that to you. Just give our office a call at 504-828-2171 or take advantage of this special offer.
You've been listening to our shows and advice on getting your finances in order and creating a retirement income plan that will last. Now is the time to take advantage of our special offer. This is Anthony Kinjemi with Crescent City Retirement Group, and we're now offering our 3-step retirement planning process at no cost and a $100 gift card to the restaurant of your choice upon completion of the planning process. Call Crescent City Retirement Group within the next 20 minutes at 504-828-2171. That number again is 504-828-2171.
And welcome back to Retirement Keys. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. I'm here with our host, Anthony Kinjemi. And Anthony, we've talked about some important questions people need to address before they retire. And we talked about, first, the sequence of returns. You told us about that, how that works and why that matters so much in retirement. And then you've been talking about, hey, what happens if the stock market drops significantly? How will that affect my plan, and strategies to address and deal with that? And Anthony, when you were talking about that, you mentioned the different buckets for different assets. And that brings us to question 15 on your list, questions to ask before I retire, which we haven't addressed yet. You kind of alluded to it, but how should those liquid assets be invested? I mean, you know, if you need liquidity, if you have a liquidity bucket, you can't have all that in the market, right?
No. The liquidity bucket, just by nature, it needs to be accessible. The funds need to be accessible. And, out just in the past, I would say maybe year, Tony, or 18 months, we really have some great options, much better options. Let's put it that way. Much better options for the liquidity bucket than we ever have. And I think most of our listeners probably are aware of it now, that even our short-term CDs are paying really well. So in the liquid bucket, you want to make sure that, again, the money is relatively liquid, right? So available when we need it. And now with just money market funds, we're earning in our brokerage accounts and our portfolios, the money market funds are earning close to 4% right now. And that money's completely liquid. And then you can ladder some very short-term CDs for some of your liquid money to earn a better return. So your liquid money can be earning money, but again, the primary purpose for your liquidity or your emergency money is to have the money available. It's not subject to the whims of the market. You're earning some good interest, and it's available if you need it. Now, that's your liquid bucket. And then we talked about the income bucket and the growth bucket. So, at the end of it, we all know we need liquidity. I mean, I don't think that's any, big, shocker or revelation to our listeners. We know in retirement we're going to need liquidity. We know in retirement we're going to need income, right? So that's true. And then we also know that, yes, we want to grow the money. We want to have a growth strategy. And we know that too. We know that things are going to cost more. We know about inflation, especially we've seen inflation really rear its head in the last 18 months. And so, of course, the feds are doing what they can by raising rates to try to get that under control, and that's working. But nevertheless, because of a shortage of workers and a shortage of supplies, supply and demand, right? And of course, we've seen that evident of that in the last 18 months or so. But nevertheless, we need to keep up with inflation. So we need growth. So we need liquidity, we need income, and we need growth. And so as we talked about in the last segment, the liquidity in this question of how should the liquid assets be invested, the answer is short term, really
Yeah.
short term. And yes, you want to get a rate of return on your liquid money. You'd like it not to just sit there in cash, right? I mean, that's not helpful. But at the same time, you don't want to tie it up, right? You want it short term. And that is this liquid or liquidity or this liquid bucket, Tony, as far as your overall, investment strategy in your retirement plan, that's a big piece. I mean, it really is. We all need emergency money. We all need liquid money. As to your point earlier, you don't want to have that money in the market and then all of a sudden the market tank and you need to pull a bunch of money out to go buy a new car or pay for a hurricane deductible and the stocks are down and then you're selling shares, at lower prices. You don't want to be put in that position.
Yeah, and that's why you work really hard to make sure that your clients' assets are properly allocated based on their situation and their needs. If they're going to need a certain amount of money within a year, you're not going to invest at the same place. You're putting the money that they need 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, right?
Well, absolutely, Tony. And so that's where that time horizon comes in. I'm 55 years old. And, when we do our workshops, I'll ask, the audience that's in the workshop, I'll ask them, can a 55-year-old be more, let's say, aggressive than a 65-year-old? And of course, everybody, instinctively will say, well, yes, of course. Okay, why is that? Why is that? And of course, the answer is because the 55-year-old presumably has more time before they need the money, right? Before the money needs to be available. So it's back to this time horizon. Well, even in retirement, Tony, to your point, you can be a 65-year-old or a 70-year-old in retirement. And the money that needs to be available for distribution in the next year or 2 or 3 years, no matter what age you are, if that money needs to be available in the next year or 2, that's the time horizon on that bucket of money, right? So it needs to be invested appropriately. For the money that doesn't need to be available for 5, 10 years down the road, well, then it can be invested differently because we don't need to call on that money until that time. We have a longer time horizon. So time horizon and when the money needs to be available and what the distribution plan looks like and how much income is going to be coming from where, that's all critical.
Yeah, and all those factors are different for each individual, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there are people, Tony, that, with their retirement money, they say, well, with my pension and Social Security and all that, we don't need to pull, any money out. But I mean, even in a situation like that, of course, there's required minimum distributions or RMDs, right? So whether they like it or not, there's gonna be a place and time where it's mandatory that they start taking these distributions. And so we need to make sure that in our distribution strategy, whether we're taking the income because we would like it to offset, to complement our retirement, or it just simply defaults to mandatory distribution, we need to make sure we have a good distribution strategy. I heard this analogy about climbing, the mountain, right? Climbing Mount Everest. And they say that, people I mean, it's kind of like a retirement. We're accumulating, we're working, we're saving, we're building, we're climbing. But then when we get to the top or we get to retirement, we have to come down, the mountain. That's our distribution strategy. And that's important. That it's very important. And there's tax implications, and we need to make sure we're taking money out of the right account at the right time. And Tony, without some really good, software and platforms. Now, of course, we use the Retirement Compass, which I just, we couldn't plan. If we didn't have the Retirement Compass, we'd have to have a comparable platform, and I'm sure they're out there. Of course, we use the Compass, but it is without that tool and without those tools to really tie in your Social Security strategy, your income plan, your pensions, your annuity strategy, your bond ladder, or your tax strategy, then everything defaults to RMD to make sure that we have a clean, transition as it relates to income when we have to start taking those RMDs. I know I'm saying a lot here, but let me just say, if you don't have a really well thought out distribution strategy for retirement, please give our office a call. Let us provide that for you. Let us provide these questions for you. Just go to crescentcityretirement.com. Let us know you listen to us on the radio and you'd like to get that second opinion, and we'd be so happy to do it for you.
Yeah, and that's key right there. Great show today, Anthony. Listeners, that does it for today's episode of Retirement Keys with our host, Anthony Congemi. Thank you for listening to Retirement Keys. Don't pay too much for taxes or retire without a sound income plan. For more information, please contact Anthony Congemi at Crescent City Retirement Group. Call 504-828-2171 or visit the website at crescentcityretirement.com.
All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. We are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.